Today we want to make the no-kneading bread together, and I have all ingredients prepared for us. 280 grams of lukewarm water is in the bowl. We will be adding 2 grams of yeast, 10 grams of salt, 320 grams of bread flour, and 80 grams of whole wheat flour. So we're starting with the water and adding our yeast to it. And then we're mixing that nicely together so that we don't see any clumps of the yeast. Okay. We're adding now the dry ingredients. So I start with the 2 types of flours. And last, we're adding the salt on top. And we're mixing that now together with a wooden spoon. So I like to use the wooden spoon for the majority of it, and then we'll be using the hands in a moment. Here we go. Just taking it off. So we just want to make sure all the flour is nicely put together in one little clump. Ideally, we want to clean up the bowl so there's no dry ingredients left and no clumps. There we go. That looks good. I like to use you can either use plastic foil, but I like to use a cloth, and we covered it and we'll let that rest for an hour and a half. Here we are again, an hour and a half later. Let's take a little peek how our dough looks like. Very nicely rised. So we are doing what is called stretch and fold technique next. I'll show you how we do that. So first we have to loosen the dough a little bit. Sometimes it works good if your hands are a little bit wet. And then we'll just get it loose on the corners. And then we pull it apart, stretch and fold it over. Punch it down. Next corner, stretch and fold, down. Rotate. And we'll try to make that in one whole circle in the first round. Then I'll loosen it up for a moment and turn it around. And we cover it and we'll let it rest for another half an hour. Back for our second stretch and fold. Let's lift our cloth. It rised nicely. You see already a difference to before. It's getting more in a round shape. So I'll make my hands wet again. I kind of learned that's the easiest way. And here we go again. First we go all the way around, making sure it loosens nicely from the bowl. And it separates. There we go. Now again, stretch and fold it down. You can tell as it will get harder. That means we did a pretty good job. So I'll want to do it one more time on that side. And we'll turn it around again. Nice and round, cover it up and let it rest another 30 minutes. Okay, 30 minutes later, we're back. take a look. This is our current stage. We are preparing the dough now for the final setup before we're baking it. So before we get into the dough, we're preparing a bowl. I found this one in my closet for today. We're putting a towel in it, adding a little bit of flour to it. Just sprinkle it over it a little bit. There we go. We do our final step here. I'll take the dough out of the bowl now on the kitchen counter. And sprinkling a little bit of flour on it. And we do our final step of stretch and fold. It's bubbling nicely, so that's good. And you just go around with your hands, making it a nice round bowl. Getting this ready. And we'll kind of get your hands under it. And we're putting it upside down in here. Closing it again. And letting it rest again half an hour. So I'm showing you how we're preparing the oven for the final baking. So we have one tray all the way at the bottom. I added a 9x13 glass casserole, filled it with water, cold water. Then we're putting one tray in the middle section. That's where we will be putting our bread in shortly. So for the heating up portion, I'm adding my baking stone. So the stone goes in here now. We're closing it. And then I'll show you how I'm setting up the oven. So we'll be selecting bake. So please do not select convection and select the highest setting that your oven has. Mine is 550. And we'll let it start and we'll be back in roughly 30 minutes when we put the bread in. We're back now. We're at the final stage. So I'll show you how we finish the bread and how we put it in the oven. So here is our bread in there. We open the cloth. I have a sheet of parchment paper prepared. I like the pre-cut versions. Put it on top. I use this plate because that's exactly the diameter of my bowl. And I'll turn it around. We'll take the bowl off. We'll take our cloth off. And here's our bread. So we'll sprinkle it with a little bit more flour and then we do the final cutting that it can nicely rise in the oven. Just a little bit more. Then I have a shaving knife here and I'll do the final one nice deep cut all the way around. There we go. You can go over it one more time. You see how the bread will open up, and then we can do just a couple in this direction. There we go. And I'll show you now how we put it in the oven. I'll leave the bread here for a second. I'll go over there. It is at 550 Fahrenheit, so be extremely careful. It is very hot and I could tell with the steam coming out, so I want to turn it down to 500 right away. Take the cookie sheet out. Oh. Move my bread. Leave the parchment paper on it, that's good. And put it right back in there. I leave it in there now for 10 minutes at 500 and we'll check back after 10 minutes. Back we are checking on our final bread. Let's take a look. I'll take it out with the stone. Looks pretty good, I would say. I want to just let you all know that I have adjusted the temperature. So I baked it for 10 minutes at 475. So I adjusted a couple minutes into it to 475, another 10 minutes after that at 425, and then my final 15 minutes at 350. And that's our result right now. Let me turn it around so you can see the bottom side, and I want to show you how I check if it's done. Turn it towards you. So it's lighter color at the bottom, and then we do the knocking. Sounds good. We'll turn it back around, and I let my bread all the time rest on a cooling rack so the air comes from the bottom and it does not get any soggy, and it keeps our nice crust. And we'll let that rest for 30 minutes or longer until it's really cool, and then we can cut it. Take a look.